In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to build a ring of diamond designs. Diamond designs like this. Now if you look closely, that grain on the outside, that walnut grain, all matches up, so it really looks like the diamond is inlaid in the piece of walnut, but it's not. There are some seams there, but because the grain matches so perfectly, those seams pretty much disappear. I'll show you how to go about doing that. I'll also show you an older way of creating a diamond by just dissanding the outside surfaces and adding pieces of wood, a couple pieces at a time. It's not as good, but I'll briefly show you how to do that as well. You might notice my ring is going to have the diamonds in this configuration, horizontal. And that's because I want the wood grain to be as horizontal as possible. I don't want to put a ring together with the diamonds like this, because then I'd have angular end grain in which to have to put something else on, and I want to avoid that. This I can live with. It's a little bit of angular end grain, but a very mild angle. This is mostly horizontal grain, and I can live with that. That shouldn't cause any problems at all. So follow along and we'll make this ring. The first decision is to decide on a shape and a size, how long, how tall, to make these diamonds. I've decided to make this particular diamond about twice as wide as it is tall. Using graph paper is an easy way to come up with a very uniform shape. Using just a little spray adhesive, I can attach this to a piece of MDF, go to the bandsaw, cut my shape out, staying just outside the line. Then using the disc sander, I'll true it up right to the line to create a perfect diamond shape. So now using my template, I've got this very nice interesting piece of maple burl. I'm just going to go around this board and pick out places where I think the wood grain is interesting, mark out diamonds, and then rough cut them on the bandsaw. I can now take these rough cut diamonds over to the disc sander, and I'm going to true up just two sides. There was no need to sand the other two sides because they'll have to be trued up for the next gluing step. I'm gluing these long strips of walnut on in this way just to save a little time. It's just a little faster to get a piece of walnut on the opposite sides of all these diamonds. It does take a lot of clamps to ensure a good tight bond everywhere. Preparing these pieces for the next step involves just knocking off the glue squeeze out and then cross-cutting them on the bandsaw. You have to be very careful not to round the tips, otherwise when you sand them flush you won't have a nice sharp point. The sanding requires a delicate touch. You can't be too aggressive. Just sand off enough to get nice, flush, smooth surfaces. To apply walnut strips to the other two sides of the diamonds, I'm using the same technique of gluing on long strips, just as the first step. Then it's back to the bandsaw, cut these apart once more, and prepare them for the next step. Because the main body of my segment is going to be dark walnut, I need to apply another border of lighter maple in order to provide contrast. After the previous sanding steps, my diamonds may not be quite as consistent in dimension, so I'm using a different technique to ensure even clamping pressure. After applying the maple to two sides, I can sand and just repeat the procedure for the other two sides. Just one more use of rubber bands. Well, this completes the diamond building portion of this feature ring construction. Here are my completed diamonds. These diamonds have turned out a little bigger than I anticipated. I'm concerned that they may not be thick enough to encompass the wall thickness of my turning, so I need to do a little calculation, a little doodling to determine if I've got enough material. By doing this drawing, I've determined that I need a segment about 4 1/4 to 4 1/2 inches long. Now if I take that 4 1/2 inches times 10 segments, I'll get a circumference of 45 inches obviously.
45 inches divided by pi, 3.14, gives me a diameter of 14.3 inches. So to confirm that I'm going to have enough wood for my wall thickness, I need to make a little drawing. I've drawn an arc based on a 14.3 diameter, and I've drawn the outside lines of my segment about 4.5 inches wide. That piece of walnut there represents the thickness of the material of the finished segment, and that inner circle would represent the inside of the vessel wall. This shows me that I have enough wood, but barely.
The next step in the construction of this feature ring with the diamonds is to put the diamonds inside some other wood, to insert them or surround them with another color. This can be done several different ways. Several of those ways are described in my book. I'll quickly go through one process which is fairly simple to do. And then I'll show a more detailed technique which gives you maybe a better look because it hides the glue joints better.
To illustrate this first, easier method, I've got a maple diamond centered on a piece of walnut, an outline, and a couple of parallel lines outside of the border of the diamond. Now it's a relatively simple matter of replacing the walnut diamond with the maple diamond, dissanding the surfaces so we have nice glue lines, and putting this 5-piece assembly back together. First step, a couple of rub joints assisted with a rubber band. Because of the angles, the rubber band will try to move this out of position. If you just hold it for about 30 seconds, then you can remove the band. Notice here I've got overhang that can be sanded off to get a nice flush fit with the next pieces. With these last two glue seams sanded, I can do a one-step glue job using a couple of cauls that are customized so that I get perpendicular pressure across the joints. Now this method is pretty easy, but it does result in diagonal glue joints that I feel attract the eye. There's a better way. Here's how I prefer to do it. I split the background material horizontally, and then label everything so the wood grain stays in the same original alignment. Next, I cut the horizontal strips into 4 quarters. Without the labels, this could get really confusing. Now I'm going to put a rubber band around each 4 quarters, center up everything. So here are my 12 backgrounds, although I only need 10. I've got a couple extra. My next chore is to mark the outlines of the diamonds. The horizontal points are centered, but the vertical points are slightly offset so that the marks that I make actually create an opening slightly bigger than the diamond. By having that opening slightly larger, I can always close it up using the disc sander. But if my opening's too small, then the only way I could get a good fit would be to sand the diamond smaller, and I don't want to do that. Because of tiny differences, it's a good idea to mark those diamonds. To remove the bulk of the walnut, I've set up my chop saw so I can make cuts just outside my marked cut lines. Disc sanding these components to fit is fussy work. Make sure you have lots of light. After sanding to the lines, then it's a matter of testing the fit. It's a matter of sand a little, test, sand a little, test, back and forth until you get a perfect fit. It takes some time to get these fits perfect, but I think it's worth the effort. When done right, I think it's a better looking joint than what I showed previously. Even though there's a total of 8 glue seams, this can be easily done in one glue step. Make sure those ends are flush the way they were originally fitted up. And it doesn't hurt to use a lot of glue, it's easily squeezed out. Notice the little scrap pieces of wood on the sides. That's so I can focus some clamping pressure right on that seam. Now it's back to the disc sander to flatten one side, and now I'm mounting the flat side to double-sided tape on these carrying trays. Without a drum sander, you can use your disc sander, but you got to be real careful to keep those sides parallel to one another. Using a parallel piece of wood lined up on the diamond tips, I can make a pencil mark, then sand to that pencil mark, take that side to the table saw, trim the other side, and center my diamonds vertically within the piece of walnut. The next challenge is to center the diamonds horizontally with an 18-degree miter cut at each end. This test ring of MDF confirms my miter angle setting. By positioning the center line on a mark on my saw bed, I can put a consistent cut on one end of all the segments. Then it's a matter of just flipping it over using a stop block to make a matching cut at the other ends. It's a double challenge. They've got to be centered and the angles have to be accurate. I have 11 diamonds, but I only need 10, so I've decided to give this one the boot. A couple of very successful dry fits and some excellent saw blade surfaces has convinced me to glue this in one step, something I rarely do. These are difficult components to sand. I'm going to glue this together using the saw blade surfaces. I don't think I can improve it with a bunch of disc sanding. I've got 20 pieces of wood to glue together. That's 40 surfaces that have to be buttered with glue. The temperature is quite warm, the humidity is quite low, so I've got to move ultra fast. I have two goals: to create 20 good-looking glue seams and to create a ring that's perfectly round. An oval ring would be disastrous. There's not enough wall thickness to create a round ring from an oval. Notice that because of the height of the ring, I'm able to use 2 hose clamps. This will create more even pressure across the glue joints. Perfect alignment of all the segment ends should result in a perfectly round ring. With the ring all completed, I can mount it, true it up round, measure it, and then design a vessel to incorporate it. Let's do a quick review on how to build these diamonds. First, you have to create a shape, then create a template. Use the template, cut out your material, then go through the process of getting borders on there, truing it up as you go, taking those diamonds, creating surrounding material, doing a real fine job of fitting up those 4 corners, truing up the surfaces, put miters on, glue it together into a ring, and then form a vessel. Easier said than done,